of the cart that you are normally supposed to get into. Behind the darkness is just an extended area, but there really isn't much else to see here. Next up is a barge with a dead fisher under it. And going through, I found myself in a small area, and looking back, you can see that much of this area wasn't textured, so we can see through the walls and even see some other parts of the stage from afar. Next is the boarded off area labeled just as Bendy. Here or another wandering fin, but unfortunately behind it is just another empty area. Okay, now is when things started to hit the fan. So I hopped into the ride and I was trying to glitch out of it, but nothing seemed to happen, so I just stopped trying. But then all of a sudden, I just randomly died out of nowhere and from nothing. Then, when trying to respawn, the game actually, kicked me backwards from the lights at the end of the tunnel, and I started to at this point, I started thinking that oddly enough, I didn't die again, and I actually managed to find stage again. Only this time, it was all messed up. Kind of how it appears during the hallucinations in this chapter. I was also only able to look forward, so getting around was a bit tougher without knowing where exactly it was that I was going. Thankfully, by this point, I played this chapter and memorized the stage layout. It was really cool to the level completely in this weird state. I seriously have no idea how this happened, but I'm really glad that I was able to record it. Luckily, I was able to find the respawn ink tunnel, and again, I was able to bring myself back to the normal stage. But as you can see, the entire stage now seems to be tilted. Okay, I'm convinced this game is officially haunted. I went back through the ride, but since I wasn't in the cart at the end, it seems like the Boris cutscene didn't get triggered, so I is now unbeatable and essentially offline. I came back to the end area just in case to see if I missed anything noteworthy, but unfortunately there wasn't anything of interest to report. And with that concludes this Lost Bits video on chapters 3 and 4 of Bendy and the Ink Machine, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to let me know if you like it down below, and also let me know what other Lost Bits videos you'd like to see.
Alam mo ba, sulit ang cash. 10% cashback.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Lost Bids right here on Turnip Gaming, the series where we explore the scrapped, unused, and unseen content in video games. So recently, the main story of Bendy and the Ink Machine has seemingly come to an end with the release of the 5th and final chapter, The Last Reel. Thankfully, Chapter 5 and the bonus Archives chapter has some noteworthy unseen and unused content for us to explore. If you haven't yet checked out my Lost Bits on chapters 1 through 4, I highly recommend you check those out after this video. Also, should go without saying, but this video will contain spoilers for those who haven't yet played through this chapter. So, here's your warning. And anyways, with all of that said, it's time to revisit Joey Drew Studios and find some Lost Bits. So first off, I just want to go over something that I mentioned in my previous video. In my video covering the first 2 chapters, I had mentioned that there was a set of unused textures found in the files for the prototype of Chapter 1. Just as was predicted, this mask and these gloves were in fact meant for a previously unseen prototype version of Bendy, which is now modeled and shown off in the game's bonus archive chapter. It is shown that this version of Bendy would basically split his head down the middle to open his mouth. Yikes. I'm really glad that they revealed this early design to us though. Overall, the archive chapter is really cool. It's almost like a playable version of my Lost Bits video which went over how the different models had evolved. Alright, now let's go over some of the textures and graphics that I believe to be unused in Chapter 5. I have looked around for these basically everywhere, and nowhere could I find them being used. As of the making of this video, the newest chapter is less than a week old, so it is likely some of these may be found or added in the future. So if they are, be sure to let me know down in the comments. Anyways, first up are a few unseen, or at least unfound, secret messages. As you may know, in Chapter 5, we are introduced to the handheld seeing tool Lightbox, which acts like the lens of truth from The Legend of Zelda and reveals secret messages when looking through it. The 3 secret messages that I was unable to find are, I will set us free, more than just a cartoon, and a heart. There is a secret drawing of a heart on a box in Chapter 4, believed to be a reference to the companion cubes from the Portal series. So maybe it was supposed to be here at one point instead. Looks very similar to the He will set us free message seen in the beginning of Chapter 2. So my best guess is that this would have been a hidden message layered over top of it. I don't really know where more than just a cartoon would have been used, as it sounds like it could be used pretty much anywhere. But my best guess is the artist room in the first chapter. Next, let's have a look at the textures used for the ending cutscene in Joey Drew's apartment. Most of the textures in these files are used, but some are normally unseen, like this Smell Like Success box and this upside down truck blanket. But we'll talk more about those later. So you may have noticed several newspapers littered around the apartment, but normally it's pretty hard to read what's actually written on them. Thankfully, by looking at the high-resolution textures, we can read a few of the headlines and see that all of the newspapers appear to be from different parts of the world and from different parts of the 20th century. There's one discussing the Second World War, and then another celebrating Princess Diana's 30th birthday. But wait, Princess Diana was born in 1961. 1991. However, the calendar on the wall of the apartment shows that this takes place in the year 1963. So either A, there's some serious time traveling going on, B, these are just some stock newspaper textures and I'm reading way too much into this, or C, Joey really likes that calendar and refuses to take it down even decades after 1963 passes. Other headlines discuss a supposed Bigfoot sighting in Scandinavia, a shark attack in and a fake radio warning in the United States. The last one might be referring to the famous radio dramatization of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds in 1938, which many radio listeners believed the dramatization to be a real news broadcast and thought aliens really were invading Earth. Something about the picture here seems off, though. It seems to be way too high of a resolution. But I couldn't really match it up with any of them. If any of you know who this is, please let me know. Next is a newspaper that appears to be some sort of weird spoof of Jethro Tull's album, Thick as a Brick. There are several similarities. The Jethro title in the corner here turned into Gollum Tree, the crest at the top, the placement of all the text, and even parts of the same article. No idea if there's any deeper meaning here, but I'm guessing whoever made this was just trying to change it enough to avoid copyright infringements. It's still pretty weird to think a spoof Jethro Tull album exists in Bendy, though. The last interesting headline reads, himself too hard, found dead at desk. This headline might be a reference to the Bendy protagonist Henry, who was once an artist at Joey Drew Studios. It says the artist pushed himself too hard, and at the end of the game, Joey tells Henry that he should have pushed a little harder. Henry also finds his old desk in Chapter 1 and Chapter 5, and comments about how much time he wasted at it. Coincidences? Probably, but either way, something to think about. The lore implications don't end there either. There are several textures of what appear to be notes written by the employees at Joey Drew Studios. First is a to-do list made by Sammy Lawrence, reminding him to finish the soundtrack for the Tombstone Picnic episode of the cartoon, record the Alice Angel voiceover, Temple, and a reminder to get the Bendy cutouts out of the recording studio, which explains that they keep multiplying, as we also saw in Chapter 2. Next are some cartoon ideas which, based on the handwriting, appear to be written by Joey himself. And then there are some ride ideas for Bendyland, probably written out by Bertram Piedmont, the creator of the Bendyland amusement park. I don't know if you know this yet, but it's pretty funny that there's a typo left in his notes. The Last note is what appears to be some sort of poem that was written out to Joey Drew for an unknown reason, to which he responds that it needs more use of the word dreaming. Next up in this same texture is a design document of the ink machine created by Wally Franks. You know, the designer of the ink machine that has hardly any importance to the plot of the story? Yeah, him. Apart from the ink and coffee stains, we are shown what certain parts of the machine are, as well as a remark from Joey Drew requesting that it should have more pipes. The last interesting unused texture appears to be writing on what looks to be a greasy bag of food. Hard to make it out in this texture, but there is another texture that we can clearly read that this bag says Allburger, probably some McDonald's-like fast food chain. There is an Allburger bag visible near the garbage in Joey Drew's apartment, but it has no visible writing. The written messages are as follows. The creator lied to us. Don't touch Boris. Chapter 3, change drop rate of items, which was apparently fixed. The names of the 3 Butcher Gang members, Charlie, and Edgar, and some writing saying me. The most interesting one to me by far is the one mentioning the drop rate of items in Chapter 3. This is basically breaking the fourth wall and is something a developer of the game would write themselves. And the item drop rate was a complaint I believe many people had with Chapter 3, which did get fixed as far as I know. But why would Joey have written this on a bag of fast food? This almost makes it seem like Joey is some sort of omnipresent, godlike figure in Bendy and the Ink Machine, which is how often enemies drop items. Now, I'm not a big theory guy myself, but I'm sure this has to have some meaning, right? Surprisingly, I haven't seen anyone talk about these yet, but I feel like it's a pretty big discovery. Let me know what you guys think. Is it just a joke by the developers, or is it something more? And lastly here, the label on the record is really hard to read normally, but viewing the text is much easier to read that the title of the album is Symphonies of Death. Pretty morbid. Alright, moving along, there is so far one audio file that is unused, and it's just of Henry asking, Joey? This file is found right after the file in which Joey says, before mentioning Boy Ink Demon, so either this would have been used right as it meets Joey at the end, or it may be possible that at one point it would have been revealed that Joey was the Ink Demon all along. Henry does sound surprised in the unused clip, so I wouldn't necessarily rule out the latter. And again, as usual for the last stop of this video, let's have a look at the unseen stuff in Chapter 5, as well as in the archives. So at the end of the super long and unskippable intro cutscene, Alice and Tom leave you for dead as they fear the Ink Demon is approaching. Here they go. Function at all for that matter, but just look at this. There's no way this didn't or won't have a purpose at some point. The bed frame is also the image used for selecting Chapter 5, so maybe there's more to this area than we know. I'm thinking maybe it might be opened in a future cases in the previous chapters. Fingers crossed. Later on, we can see Alice and Tom zipping away in their boats. I was curious to see if they actually do drive all the way to their destination, but it looks like they just disappear when they go out of view. Of course, I had to try and see what the giant hands look like from under the ink, but it was a bit easier said than done, as for some reason the game wasn't letting me clip through the boat at first. But it turns out that after you let one of the hands kill you, they respawn. The hands that were loaded previously are still hiding under the ink. So here you are. This is what they look like in full. Interestingly enough, the hand that pulls down the boat on the Alice still found under the ink a look as a sort of deterrence. Although not as elaborate as the one city we found in Chapter 4, it was nice to see him make an appearance here. Unfortunately, however, this is the only city that I was able to find. Entering the vault, there is a room flooded with ink that you have to drain. But we skip past the room, oddly enough, we can skip the door from the other side, and the ink remains in place. Now that's what I call... After exiting the vault, we get to a hallway in which the ink demon walks by. When getting here the first time, I thought for sure there would have been a cine found somewhere in there. Like it's such an obvious place that snooping players would explore. But alas, there are no wandering sins to be found. There are functioning doors, like, come on, infinite opportunity if you ask me. And you know what would have been awesome? If they added a secret wandering sin in one of these rooms that you could only see through the seeing tool. Now that would have been slick. Moving on. If they added a secret wandering sin in one of these rooms that you could only see through the seeing tool. Now that would have been slick. Moving on, just before the final boss, a few of you wanted a closer look at the ink machine being lowered into the bigger ink machine. Nothing too crazy to see here, unfortunately, but I guess we can see the back of it, which is normally not visible as far as I can remember. There unfortunately wasn't anything noteworthy in the boss fight area, so let's move on to the ending cutscene. So off the get-go, the first thing I wanted to check out was the slightly opened door to the bathroom in Joey's bedroom. And although it was very alluring, it's really dark inside, and there's nothing really here. But here's where the cool stuff starts. So the last scene in this chapter is the camera moving to a picture of the main characters of the cartoon, where Henry's last name is revealed. On the way there, we can see some sort of ink machine in the adjacent room. Turns out it's still there in the area that we get to move around in. It was a bit tricky to explore, as normally if you get anywhere near it, the game will actually suck you into the ending cutscene, in which you can't move around. But after playing around with the code, I was able to disable the cutscene and explore two. So here you go. Here is a closer look at the mysterious ink machine we are teased with at the end of the game. In this room are also several boxes that I mentioned earlier that we don't see anywhere else, as well as the upside-down blanket covering the window. We normally don't get to take a good look at. Moving on to the kitchen, with free reign, we can now move around to take a look at some more like this magazine on the table, and inside Joey Drew's head. Nice eyeballs he got there. And also still found here in the kitchen, even though again, normally I don't think there's any way you'd be able to turn to see it. While we're in the kitchen, let's talk about the date that appears on the calendar here. If you've played through this ending more than once or watched it on more than one channel, you may have noticed that the date seems to change every time to a different day in August. And August 31st is circled in red, and it is the only circled date suggesting it has to be of some importance. Many fans have theorized that if you end up in this area on August 31st, a special ending will occur. Unfortunately, though, when digging through the game's code, I found a command which basically generates a number for the kitchen calendar between 1 and 30. So no, there is no way to influence what day it is when you get there, and unless there is a secret way to change the calendar to the 31st in a way that I didn't find in the code, getting here on August 31st is currently impossible. I guess only time will tell what the significance of August 31st is. And lastly for this chapter, as a nod to the twist at the end where Joey sends you back to restart the cycle of chapter 1, the back of the door you exit through is stylized like the British doors we see everywhere else in the game. Finally, bonus archives chapter. Everywhere else in the game. A nice little Easter egg for those who like to snoop. And finally, let's quickly check out the bonus. Given that the whole area here is quite small, there's only one thing soon as I played this chapter for the first time, I noticed this door that said, "Danger, keep out," and I knew that had to be bait. This archive room shows all of the variations of Bendy except one. So, behind this door and to the left, on the wall, is, you guessed it, Untitled City. Unfortunately, this one doesn't make the crazy sound like the other ones do. I'm guessing because it's super close to where you spawn, so it would have been a dead giveaway. I'm glad the devs left him in here as a final send-off to one of my favorite hidden Easter eggs in a game. Till we meet again, old friend. And with that concludes this third Lost Bits video on Bendy and the Ink Machine, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know with a like down below. It seriously helps me out a lot. Also, if you haven't yet watched my Lost Bits videos on chapters 1 to 4, you can do so by clicking on the card right here, which will take you to the first video. If you're new here and would like to stay even more up to date with me and the channel, subscribe here, as well as follow me over on my other social media things, which will all be linked in the description. Right here on Tetrabit Gaming, the series where we explore the scrapped, unused, and unseen content in video games. So in my previous Deltarune Lost Bits video, I tested the waters to see if you guys would be interested in an Undertale video. And you guys absolutely smashed that video with likes, so here we are. Now whether you love or hate Undertale, there is no denying its success and the game. So forgive me if I don't understand some deeper lore or references in this video. And with all of that out of the way, there is a lot to cover in this video, so go grab Sans Undertale, and it's time to find some Lost Bits. So to start things off, we'll look at the game's unused audio, which surprisingly there is melting. In the interest of time, I'll just be playing short clips of each track that I think is interesting. First up is King Description. This track is just a version of the game over theme. With the word theme in the file name, it is believed this track would have been used in some Asgore-related scenes. And we have F Part 3, which is an unused variation of Flowey's boss music. Good old Mini. Next up is Piano, a track that was demo after killing Toriel. It was unused in the Yet another unused piano song, Ruin's Piano is next, and just like the name suggests, it's a version of the song that is used in Ruins. Star is a fitting name, as apparently the song uses instrument samples that were used in the original Star Wars. Unfortunately, be used in the fight against magic when his magic orbs turn into hearts. Undertale's start menu music changes as you befriend more characters in the game. However, only 6 of the 7 total songs are actually used. Here is menu 5, which is normally unheard. We have a grunting voice for apparently a swipe, presumably for meta time. And there's 3 unused flowy lines of him saying triple, J, and ah. unused text strings.
Presents for the ones who...
See you later. Arousing error. Wowie. Nice error. Flagrant error. Error. Heavens. I'm a goofy goober. Yeah, this error message. If you are reading this, I messed up somehow. This is an error message. Really? And then my favorite, an entire I'll be honest, I have no idea what happened for you to get here. This is actually something ending. Tell whoever made the game, okay? They'll fix it, or if it's a novel situation, they might even add another ending to the game. Chances are, though, you're just a dirty hacker, aren't you? Yeah, get out of here. Next is some unused monsters don't get ill, but they describe those that are old or close to death as falling down. Next is the section in the script for Metaton's twist. It's found right after Metaton mentions that Alfie's names programming variables after her crush. So of course, those curious enough to go check the files to see who Alfie's crush is were met with the following message. Lol, if you came to this part of the code to see who I have a crush on, you're out of luck. There's also an unused mortal enemy. Let's see here. Die. To which you could have responded, or just ignore. Next is a text string which just reads Beepus Valley granola bars. Like this group of major values or Beepus. Then there are these two text strings found among the dialogue for the Photoshop Flowey fight. Alrighty then. Test Monster is an early version of Froggen, for, you guessed it, they share many of the same lines, but these are the lines that are unused normally by Froggins. And in this line, we can see Toby Fox's frustration. And the last notable unused text string is Alfie's 17th lab entry, which is normally skipped in the true lab. It basically just explains that with too much determination, the bodies of the monsters begin to break down. So it looks like Undertale also has some items that were scrapped from the game. A croquet roll, which would have healed 15 HP. Stoic a ghost fruit, which would heal 16. And puppy dough ice cream, which would heal 8 HP. There's also rock candy, which would heal 1 HP, and would even come with its own recipe. But I think the recipe is a bit too complicated. Next up is a battle sequence that is unused. This battle would have been with RG3 and RG4, two royal guards that are mentioned in the game during a phone conversation with Undyne. They would have been seen as two friends that got into a fight, and trying to get them to put their differences aside would have been the way to pacify and spare them. After winning the battle, sprite that is just Aaron's defeated sprite, for some reason. Several messages hidden in Undertale by Fox in an attempt to deter hackers and data miners from spoiling the game, and messages are found as audio files, text strings, and graphics, but I felt like they deserve their own little section in this video. Let's start off with the text that is found in Script Attention Hackers number 2. Toby goes to save. Part of this game's charm is that it's options or secrets there are. If you are reading this, information or doing secrets will become pointless. By the way, most of the seemingly unused text files are used. If you can find the in-game context for an asset, you can show it off. But if you can't, it probably means you haven't looked hard enough. Anything truly unused, I'll probably post myself later. Living in a world like this, where people can simply chill the answers has really damaged me, hasn't it? This message was changed in the version 1.001 update to a much shorter and more cryptic message. Next, let's have a listen to the Don't Spoil the Game audio track titled ABC 123A.
It's impossible to have mysteries nowadays.
Because no
These people of this between us.
If you all sleep online, I won't break any more secrets.
Now that's creepy. Definitely wouldn't be listening to that alone in the dark. This was also changed in the update to just more of the creepy laughter. And lastly, we have a graphic of Toby Fox asking for players to not upload large sprite sheets online for at least a year, as he believes they may spoil the game for many people. Unfortunately, I doubt many people listened to his plea. This image was again also changed in the update to an even more bizarre image that read, "You know what I hate? That's Beakus. Taste, smell, the texture. Hey, you're drooling." Something tells me Toby really likes the word Beakus. Alright, and now onto the unused graphics, and there are a lot of them. Just like we saw in Deltarune, this game also has quite a few crude placeholder graphics. Like this crudely drawn dude, Test Monster 1, Test Monster 2, and a tall red boy just known as the Lava Test Creature. But let's call him Lava Test Larry. There's also Tile Guy, an old version of the spheres that pop up from the ground that look pretty, suggestive. Some early versions of Undyne's attack, some crude placeholder hearts, arrow signs that were apparently related to papyrus in some way, old prototype letters meant for Mettaton's quiz, a graphic of the word touch, a placeholder graphic for Mettaton's cooking show's jetpack section, text saying don't move, the debug tile sprites we also saw in Deltarune, a crudely drawn stable, and a crude rusted fridge. And while on the topic of crudely drawn things, there is also normally unseen concept art of some areas in the lab, as well as Undyne's house. Again, like we saw in Deltarune, Undertale also followed the plan of these concepts pretty well. And don't end there. There's also some placeholder graphics for a spell command. The Photoshop Flowey fight is perhaps one of the most disturbing and creepy boss fights I've ever seen, and the original concept art for it isn't any better. In fact, it's even more creepy. Like, how could someone bring themselves to create something like this? Along with this, is a vivid flame that is presumably an early version of Flowey's flames, as well as unused graphics of Flowey's finger gun seen with the arm attached to the hand, instead of the defined as seen in the game. Next is another test monster that looks like a guard dog. This monster goes by the name Doge. Must use such armor. Wow. There's also this little guy, an unused Roblox NPC that would have apparently been seen in Hotland. We also got an overworld sprite of some ballet shoes, which you can get in the game, but since they are hidden behind some grass, they are never actually seen. A table with 2 chairs meant for Muffet's room, an unused chair that would have been used in Grillby's bar, a singular bone, and a candy dish sprite, which we will get back to later. Next up is Big Bob, Big Bob as he's known in this game. If you've seen my Lost Bits video on Super Mario Bros. 2 for the NES, you may remember this unused placeholder sprite was found in that game. I just can't believe how close the name is to what I gave Bitbob to. Not sure if it's just a coincidence, or if Toby Fox frequents the cutting room floor too, and put this in as a little Easter egg since they used Bitbob as their tab image. Additionally, there's also a smaller and inverted version of this sprite known as Met Fodder. Judging by the name, these mini Bitbob mobs were probably placeholders for some sort of food or something, somewhere related with Mettaton. Moving along, there are also early versions of Azrael's sword, Azrael's gun, the present used in Path, a large heart sprite titled Confused Hearts, a faceless Gaster Blaster, white-eyed Sands, an alternate version of the snowman that gives us a piece of himself, a sprite titled Confused Hearts, a faceless Gaster Blaster, white-eyed Sands, an alternate version of the snowman that gives us a piece of himself, a happy sprite of Washua, Napster Blue adjusting a sand, a chaos-bound explosion meant for Photoshop Flowey's voice, and some overworld ice blocks, probably meant for Snowden. Okay, we got a few more to go. Next are some unused, goofy, flowy faces that if the player somehow could defeat Asgore in one hit. Then we have some unused battle sprites for Mettaton EX that would have supposedly been used after he is defeated. Next up are some unused portraits of Sans, Undyne, Alphys, Alfie, and the Blushing Papyrus. There's also a crying bird, an unused background for the Snowding shop, and sprites of a breaking egg carton likely meant for Mettaton's. cutting deeper. Photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very... This too could be Gaster, as they both speak in Wingdings. Interestingly, exiting this room also automatically takes you to the game's sound test screen. Room Water 13 appears to be a large test area for Waterfall's assets, namely the tall grass. In a similar manner, Room contains several Waterfall assets in addition to a crystal and an NPC. Room Water 7 Old is a room that was originally meant to be used in Waterfall, as it again uses several of its assets. This area also has some otherwise unseen torches which can be lit just by interacting with them. After they are all lit, an invisible path that leads to basically nowhere will be outlined by some crudely drawn assets. Room Overworld is a large but mostly empty test room with several lava test Larrys. The only other notable thing in this room is an area that triggers a Flowey monologue, which then transitions to a battle sequence. Next, although Room Fire 4 uses some assets from Waterfall, based on the name and the music that is played here, it was more likely intended to be used as an area in Hotland. Similarly, Room Fire 10 Old also uses some Waterfall assets, but was again probably meant to be used in Hotland. There's not too much here besides this long conveyor belt thing. Falling off this conveyor belt leads to another unused area, Room Fire 10A Old. This area just has another long conveyor belt, a bowl of dry dog food, and a door which just leads us back up to the previous room. Okay, hope you're not getting tired of these unused rooms yet, because we have two more notable ones to go. Room Monster Line Test just quickly shows a distorted memory head enemy before it disappears. As the name implies, this was also probably just used for testing. Room Meet Undyne Old is pretty self-explanatory again. This is an early version of the room where you first meet Undyne, but with some snowed-in NPCs and Waterfall assets. There are also some boards in the middle here which basically making this room pretty pointless. You thought that was it? Bonus bit, I kept this lost bit for last because it isn't actually in the game at all, but rather on the official Undertale website. Simply by right-clicking on the page and viewing the source code, the following secret message can be found. What are you doing? Looking for secrets? Don't put your nose where it doesn't belong, or you might learn something you don't like. Hee hee hee. Whatever you say, Mr. Fox. Whatever you say. And with that concludes this super long Lost Bits video on Undertale, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think this is the longest Lost Bits video that I'll make for quite a while, so big shoutouts if you made it to the end here. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to slap a like down below, and also let me know